Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dark Sleep Radio here on this channel. I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep before we dive in. I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. I was deep in the northern Minnesota woods during late October bow season, about 6 miles in. Solo trips have been my routine every fall for over a decade, and this one followed my usual setup. A small tent, day pack, rangefinder, and trail map tucked into my back pocket. The day before, I'd hiked in and camped near a ridgeline overlooking a stretch of birch and pine. Good game trail tracks about half a mile from camp meant I spent most of the next day in a blind I'd constructed from deadfall and brush. By late afternoon, the wind had dropped, so I began packing up. The silence struck me first. Earlier, I'd heard squirrels and distant crows, but around 5:30, everything just stopped. Completely. Not a gradual fade, but an instant muting of the woods. I wasn't scared. I'd experienced this before when larger predators like bears or mountain lions move into an area. As I walked back to camp, keeping alert, that's when I heard it. A clicking sound. Faint initially, but sharp and evenly spaced. It reminded me of a ratchet or an old film reel spinning. Strangely, the sound wasn't coming from the ground, but directly above me. I stopped and looked up. Nothing. Absolutely nothing was moving. No branches, no clouds, just clear sky through the treetops as dusk settled in. The mechanical clicking continued, centered precisely on my location. When I moved left, the sound followed. I stopped, and it stopped. Turning in place changed nothing. Walking faster didn't alter the situation. The clicking remained directly overhead, seemingly attached to me somehow. Its consistent, mechanical nature was deeply unsettling, a sound that defied explanation, fixed to my position with an almost intelligent precision. The clicking haunted me from the start. Perfectly timed 3-click pause, 3 more clicks over and over a tree to dodge. It changed direction, but it stayed locked above me like an invisible anchor. Something shifted, but not in any physical way. It couldn't point to temperature or wind. What it felt was deeper assonance that invaded my bones. The trail around me felt strange, muted, like walking through dense insulation. My footsteps seemed flat and lifeless, while the clicking remained razor-sharp. Erased, back to camp, abandoning all normal caution. I didn't fold my tent, just crammed it into me bag and moved fast. I'm not someone who scares easily, but a cold certainty drove me to leave. Immediately, the sound tracking me overhead, constant, unchanging halfway back. It felt more than heard something watching me. This wasn't the vagueness of wilderness solitude, but a targeted presence. I kept looking back, expecting to see someone standing on the trail. Nothing moved, nothing made sound except that persistent clicking hanging in the air directly above, now like an unseen speaker. It considered using my satellite phone for help, even pull. Edit out, but couldn't imagine what I'd say. How do you report an invisible clicking sound? It decided against calling anyone. Near the trail's end, something abruptly changed. The clicking stopped mid-pattern to total silence descended, but this wasn't peaceful. The woods remained unnaturally still, no insects, no birds, nor rustling. Just a thick blank quiet that felt wrong. I strained to hear anything. My own breathing seemed muffled, like it was underwater. It didn't stop moving after that moment. He just wanted out. That night flight from Phoenix to Spokane was nothing out of ordinary, a routine cargo run I'd made countless times before. Cruising at 11,000 feet over Nevada, with clear skies and smooth conditions, I settled into the familiar rhythm of the journey. My small twin-prop aircraft hummed steadily, and the radio chatter provided background noise as I sipped lukewarm coffee from a metal thermos that always carried a hint of jet fuel. Off my left wing, about a mile out, something caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just a knot, her aircraft, with steady white and red running lights gliding alongside me. It matched my trajectory perfectly. Same speed, same direction, which wasn't entirely unusual. I'd seen other aircraft at a distance plenty of times, especially around busier flight corridors. But something felt different this time. The craft wasn't communicating on any radio frequency. My separate receiver, constantly scanning for nearby aircraft, remained silent. No call-ins, no altitude reports. Its presence was eerily quiet. Weeks later, back home, I found myself staring at my GPS tracker. While unpacking, I'd noticed something strange. A blank 20-minute stretch between 5:41 and 6:03 p.m., showing a straight line across a section of woods I knew I'd wound through. The tracker was working fine before and after that period, its batteries fully charged. I didn't return to those woods that season. I didn't even renew my tag the following year. The GPS file remains saved on my computer, and occasionally I'll open it, transfixed by that unexplained straight line. Nothing else I'd brought out there had glitched, just that one stretch. After returning to my truck that day, with the sun barely hanging on the horizon, I threw my gear in the bed and sat silently with the engine off and windows down. The silence was profound. No wind in the trees, no distant highway sounds. Then, just as I turned the key, normal sounds rushed back. Crickets, rustling leaves, distant crows. The air seemed to snap back into place, as if something had momentarily released its grip. I drove home that night without stopping, barely eating. The clicking sound I'd heard earlier never returned. No announcements, no chatter, just a blank space on my tablet where something should be tracking. I was flying and expecting to see the usual ADS-B signals. Every aircraft with a transponder normally shows up here. But this was different. Two steady points of light hanging out there. One red, one white, exactly the same brightness. No blinking, no strobes, nothing like a typical aircraft. My first thought was military, maybe a test flight, something running without standard markings, but something felt off. What really caught my attention was how it moved, or didn't move. Most aircraft drift slightly when you're both traveling fast, but this thing stayed perfectly positioned relative to me, like it was locked onto an invisible track. I radioed air traffic control just to be safe. They confirmed no traffic in my area, but acknowledged my visual. Calm, professional response, which didn't match how weird this felt. After about 5 minutes, I grabbed my binoculars, hoping to get a clearer look. But instead of details, I just saw those two lights hanging there like eyes on a dark face. Then it did something impossible. The whole thing rotated smoothly on its axis. Not banking, not turning, just pivoting 90 degrees vertical. The lights shifted from horizontal to vertical, and it just stood there in the sky, matching my speed. No trail, no sound, no wobble. That's when I knew this wasn't any aircraft I'd ever seen. It moved like gravity was optional. Then suddenly, whoosh, straight up and gone. No acceleration, no build-up, just instant departure. I was driving back late from my sister's place in Greenwich, a Sunday night around 10. She lives out in the country, and the drive home takes about an hour, mostly through back roads with no lights and barely any cell signal. I've done this route countless times and usually enjoy the quiet. No traffic, no distractions, just me, the road, and whatever's on the radio. That night, I took County Road 47, as always. It cuts across some farmland before winding through about 10 miles of wooded area before hitting Highway 8. The wooded stretch is my least favorite part. The road narrows, and there aren't any houses for miles. Just trees pressing in from both sides, no streetlights, no markers, no other cars. It's easy to feel completely isolated. I had the radio on low, tuned to a classic rock station from Marshall. The Eagles were playing in the background when something extraordinary happened. A vertical object appeared beside me, perfectly smooth and moving at an impossible pace. It vanished into the black sky in about a second, leaving no afterglow, no sonic boom, no change in air pressure, just sudden absence. My heart was pounding. I was holding the yoke with one hand, binoculars dangling from the other. My instruments showed nothing unusual. Autopilot held steady, cabin pressure normal, temperature and heading all consistent. I called air traffic control, reporting a traffic departure, vertical and of unknown type. They acknowledged briefly and asked if I needed to file a report. I said I'd note it in my post-flight documentation. The rest of the flight continued without incident, but I couldn't stop scanning the sky. Every light, every glint, every flicker drew my attention. When I landed at the airport, the tower crew was friendly. I didn't mention what I'd seen. I wasn't sure how to explain it without sounding dramatic. After filling out basic paperwork and fueling up, I drove to my usual motel outside Spokane. That night, I lay in bed with the TV on mute, listening to the air conditioner cycling on and off. I kept replaying the event in my mind. The pacing, the silence, the way it rotated, the way it left. I didn't report it to the FAA. Instead, I wrote it in my personal flight log under unusual visual, the same category I use for meteor trails or weird cloud formations. That's as far as I went. I haven't flown that route at night again, not because I won't, but I just haven't had a reason to. If I do, I'll be watching the sky differently and keeping my binoculars closer. I was driving down this stretch of road, cruising at a steady 50, half listening to the radio. A live version of some song was playing, with an announcer mentioning a call-in contest. My mind wandered as I passed familiar landmarks: a rusted gate, a leaning mailbox with no numbers, and this weirdly bright stop sign at an access road that goes nowhere. 10 minutes into the wooded stretch, I glanced at the dash. 10:17. I slowed slightly at the stop sign, nothing unusual, but something felt off. The road kept stretching, unchanging. Black trees on both sides, same strip of asphalt repeating endlessly. I thought maybe I was just tired, zoning out. Then it happened. The stop sign appeared again, exact same spot, same broken signpost, same mailbox. And the radio? Mid-sentence, exactly where it had been before. Like a CD skipping, but without actually skipping. I checked the clock, still 10:17. The odometer hadn't moved. I pulled over, engine running. Silence when I killed the radio. My phone showed no signal, just a spinning GPS map trying to locate me. I tried rationalizing. Maybe I'd gotten turned around somehow, though the road was a straight shot to Highway 8 with no turns. I reversed, drove back. 5 minutes passed, and there it was again. The stop sign. Same view, same angle, everything identical. Something was very wrong. I was driving down a familiar road when something felt off. The silence was different. No crickets, no frogs, no distant dog barks. Just complete stillness. I'd driven this route before, but this time everything seemed wrong. Checking my odometer, I noticed nothing had changed. The car was running, but something wasn't right. I turned on the dome light and stepped outside. The woods looked strange, almost like they were inching closer to the road. Trees seemed to wait, suspended in an unnatural quiet. My phone was useless. Calls wouldn't connect, stuck on the dialing screen like time had frozen. When I got back in the car and started driving, the radio played the same song at the exact same spot. It was like being trapped in a screenshot. Everything paused except me. I watched the road carefully. White dashes passed by, but nothing truly changed. Seconds ticked identically, no new potholes appeared. Then suddenly, the car shuddered, a deep vibration through the frame, though the road looked perfectly smooth. In the distance, headlights appeared. They didn't move closer or change brightness, just hung there, suspended half a mile away. Then abruptly, they vanished, like someone flipped a switch. A deep pressure hit my ears, similar to a sudden altitude drop. Then everything snapped back to normal, sound returning as quickly as it had disappeared. Later that night, I sat on the couch trying to make sense of what happened. Earlier, the day had started with a strange call from Harv Denning, an old rancher I'd known since childhood. He was always grumpy and suspicious of trespassers. Around 9:30 p.m., Harv called dispatch, reporting something unusual in his east field. Not a brush fire or lightning, but something he described as a star that caught fire and forgot how to fall. I was already on patrol, so I decided to check it out when I arrived at his property. Harv was standing at the edge of his driveway, coat half on, pointing toward the tree line. He didn't speak at first, just squinted and pointed again between two pine trees. "Lo, do you see it?" Hasked followed his finger and saw something strange, a deep red light hovering about 100 feet above the ground, a few hundred yards out. Out it wasn't fire exactly, more like a stationary flare, too bright to be a star, too low to make sense, no sound, no movement, just a constant glow. Harv said it had been there for 20 minutes and hadn't moved. A ninja grabbed my binoculars from the cruiser, hoping for a clearer view, but they revealed nothing. No shape, no blinking, just the persistent tread light. Later, driving back, the radio played in the background, the song. Ended and a commercial started. I glanced at the clock, 10:39. My odometer showed about 20 miles, slightly more than expected, especially since I'd driven past the stop sign again this time. Approaching from a different side, the access road looked normal, just a dirt trail leading into the tree, sending in brush. By the time I reached Highway 8, I was shaking not from cold, but nerves. I drove straight home, locked the door, and sat on the couch for hours that night. It checked the radio station's website. Their song log showed the Eagles' Strack should have E, but he'd heard the same line 3 different times mid-sentence. Each time I passed that sign, I haven't driven that road since. I first noticed the red light when I was using binoculars. It was a solid glow hanging in the dark. When I lowered the binoculars, it vanished completely. Harv, who was with me, swore he didn't see it leave. 2 hours later, I got a call from Trina Linscomb near the old mill at Barlow Creek. She described a strange red light hovering over the water, which she called a burning marble. When I arrived at the boat launch, her dog was whining nervously. I looked where she pointed, but saw nothing. She told me the light had been facing almost due east across the creek. Standing at the water's edge, I felt something odd, like the air had been completely emptied out. It wasn't a normal feeling, but that's the best way I could describe it. After that, reports started coming in more frequently. Always the same description, a red light like a burning star, hovering just above trees or fields. Never high in the sky, never moving, never making a sound. People who saw it didn't feel scared, exactly, but felt watched. I tried logging the reports initially, but after the fourth or fifth, I stopped. There was never anything to follow up on. By the time I'd arrive, the light would vanish. No one ever saw it up close or managed to capture it on camera. One guy claimed to film it for almost a minute, but when he checked the footage, there was nothing, just black sky and his own breathing. The strangest part was its behavior. It never appeared in more than one place simultaneously. If someone saw it near the highway, no one else would report a sighting until it disappeared from there. Then it might show up on the other side of town or by the lake. Another peculiar detail. Every sighting involved a single person. No group encounters, no couples, no families. Just individuals, walking a dog, driving home, taking out trash, sitting on a porch. If someone went out with a friend to look for it, nothing would appear. But if they were alone, even just briefly, someone might see it. I saw it twice more myself. The second time was past the silo behind Bailey's farm. The red thing first appeared during my drive back into town. I caught a glimpse of it through the passenger window, hovering low above the hill, sharp and still. I pulled over, killed the engine, and watched it through the windshield. I'm not sure how long I sat there. The object didn't move. Eventually, I stepped out of the car and stood by the door, studying it. Was it far away, or just small and close? It didn't cast any light on the trees beneath, which seemed strange given how bright it was. It looked like it had been cut out of the sky, existing without glowing. Something made me whisper, maybe asking what it was, maybe saying my own name. I wanted it to know I was there. I waited for it to move, but it remained motionless. Then I blinked, and it was gone. No sound, no streak across the sky, just absent. A weird buzzing filled my legs. Not an actual sound, but a nervous electric feeling in my muscles. Like I might run, though I had no intention of doing so. I eventually drove home. The third and final time I saw it was different. Nearly 5 in the morning, coming off my shift, driving past the abandoned drive-in theater. The old screen still stood in an empty field of weeds. This time, the red object was brighter, hovering low over the screen. I slowed down, but didn't stop. Something felt heavier, different. I didn't want to look directly at it. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, it seemed to dip slightly lower. It was behind me, not chasing, not flying, just present, matching my speed precisely. For about 3 miles, it remained the same distance away, perfectly consistent. Then I passed under the Main Street overpass. When I emerged on the other side, it had vanished. I pulled over, walked into the grass, looked around. Nothing. That was almost a year ago. I haven't seen it since. But sometimes, driving past certain places, old fields, quiet highway stretches, I catch myself looking up, not expecting to see anything, just looking. I was up on the barn roof around 11:30 that night, which isn't the usual time for roofing. But I'd been putting off fixing the southern eave where the storm had ripped off some shingles earlier in the week, and we were supposed to get rain the next day. The floodlight on the corner of the house lit up the yard perfectly, and the full moon was bright with no clouds. I figured I had a couple good hours of decent visibility. The night was quiet with no wind, the kind of stillness where you hear every creak of the ladder and every rustle in the grass. Frogs by the creek and occasional owl hoots drifted through the trees. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt, just me, the night, and a loose patch of roof that needed fixing. While kneeling near the ridge cap and hammering a nail into a warped board, the light around me started to dim. It wasn't like a cloud passing overhead, but more like someone slowly turning down a dimmer switch. The moonlight softened, almost as if it got filtered. I looked up automatically, and that's when I saw it. Something passed between the moon and me, a shadow, huge and solid. It didn't zip by, but glided slowly enough that I had time to stand up and watch it move across the moon's face. Yet it was fast enough that I couldn't catch every detail. No lights, no sound, just this massive black shape that looked wrong against the sky. It wasn't a normal shape. Not round, not like a blimp or balloon, but a long, uneven oval with jagged edges. Not broken, but seemingly designed that way. It reminded me of a manta ray, except not alive and not flying as it should. It had a kind of drift, but stayed perfectly level, like it was moving on rails. I froze. Not scared at first, just confused, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It passed fully across the moon in maybe 5 seconds, then just vanished, blending back into the sky. I looked all around, waiting to hear something. A plane engine, rotor blades, anything. But there was nothing, not even the frogs or the owl. I stayed up there for another minute or two, just staring at the sky, hammer still in my hands. Eventually, I climbed down and walked out into the middle of the yard, trying to spot it again. I checked my flight tracker app repeatedly, but nothing showed up. No aircraft, no choppers, no weather balloons within 50 miles. Growing up around planes, my dad flew crop dusters. I'm familiar with all sorts of aerial vehicles. Jets, gliders, drones, experimental UAVs. I've seen them all. But this was different. That night, something unusual happened. A dark shape passed in front of the moon, unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Back in the house, my wife slept peacefully. I sat on the couch, trying to make sense of it. My sketch attempt was pathetic, just a black blob with no defined wings, lights, or windows. Around 3 a.m., I got up for a drink and noticed the shed's motion sensor light flickering strangely. Something was triggering it, then moving away. This wasn't a typical bug or wind response. It was deliberate. I grabbed a flashlight and walked the property, finding nothing. The goats caught my attention. Normally scattered and relaxed in the straw, they were now huddled tightly at the far end of the pen, pressed against the fence. Their ears were up, eyes fixed on the tree line. Not a sound came from them, just pure, intense focus. The next morning, I checked for tracks. The ground was soft from recent rain, perfect for leaving evidence. But nothing, absolutely nothing. At the local feed store, I casually asked around. Nobody had seen anything unusual in the sky. Not even Jim, the ridge-dwelling guy who spends nights with binoculars. Interestingly, he mentioned his dogs had gone crazy barking around midnight, about 30 minutes after my sighting. I never filed an official report. What would I say? I saw a big shape pass the moon and vanish? The FAA wouldn't care. But occasionally, the memory still haunts me, leaving me wondering what exactly I witnessed that night. Barn kek swear dat night or the goats act skittish for no reason. I'll catch myself looking up more often now when I'm outside after dark. It's been about 6 months, nothing like it has happened again. But that night hasn't stopped nagging at me to shape the silence the way the light changed just before it passed over. Or don't know what it was. Just know it was out near Red Mesa, about 40 miles off from any decent-sized town, trying to shoot the Milky Way. No moon that night, no clouds, dry as hell. You could see every damn star, all the way down to the horizon. I'd been planning the trip for a few weeks, had my tracker and intervalometer set up. Brought my gear out in the truck. Tent, cooler, tripod, everything. I'd camped out there a couple times before, just solo stuff. Never had an issue. Sometimes you get coyotes yipping in the distance or hear something big move through the brush at night. But nothing crazy. It's quiet. Good for long exposures. I set up a little ways off the dirt road, maybe a half mile from the truck. Wanted to get far enough that headlights from anyone passing wouldn't mess up my shots. Not that anyone ever really comes out that way. I'd picked a spot with a clean view of the southern sky. Clear, open stretch, no trees, just rock and dirt and sky. Started shooting around 11:30. Everything looked good. I was using a 14mm lens, long exposure, stacked with a star tracker. After the first few rounds, I noticed something weird in the previews. In the middle third of the sky, dead center in the frame, there was this dark, dark patch. Not a shadow, not vignetting, not a shadow from anything nearby. Just a clean, starless area, like something had erased part of the sky. I figured it was a camera issue. Maybe the sensor was messing up or the lens fogged. But when I checked the gear, everything was clean. No dust, no condensation. I swapped lenses just in case. Same result. The stars were there around the edges, but in the center, just this oval of nothing. Not black exactly, just blank. So I looked up, took my eyes off the camera, and just stared at the sky. Nothing. No dark shape, no clouds, just stars. I checked the composition on the tripod to line it up manually. Still pointing at the same part of the sky, still fine to the naked eye. I ran another set of exposures. Same thing. Stars on the edges, nothing in the middle. I turned the tracker off and took some shorter exposures to rule that out. Still, got the same blank patch and everything went quiet. No sound at all, not even the usual rustle of the tent flap or the bugs. It was around 1 a.m. and the wind had completely died down. I sat by the tripod and zoomed in on the LCD to examine the images more closely. The patch wasn't sharp-edged or perfectly circular. It had a strange, soft quality, almost like it was subtly shifting between frames. The borders seemed to twitch, but only if you looked very carefully. I stood up, stretched my legs, and walked around the gear. Looking straight up, the sky remained perfect and clear. When I returned to the camera and pointed it at the same area, the void was still there. I moved the tripod about 20 degrees west and tried again. New frame, new exposures, but the patch followed. At that point, I stopped shooting and packed up the camera, turning off the tracker. I didn't want to leave, but I also didn't want to keep pointing the lens at, whatever that was. Walking north with my flashlight, I scanned the area. No animals, no footprints, nothing unusual on the ground. But the air felt heavy, not hot, just thick and unnatural. I couldn't see anything, but I started feeling watched. This was different from anything I'd experienced before. I've camped in this desert for years without problems, but now the sensation was specific, like a needle pricking my back from one precise direction. Every time I turned, the feeling moved, always staying behind me. No sound, no movement, just pressure. I ended up sitting in the truck. I hadn't planned on sleeping there, but the tent suddenly felt unwelcoming. I left the gear outside, windows cracked, with the flashlight on the seat next to me. Around 2:30, I got out and checked the sky again. Still clear, no clouds, nothing moving. I took one last handheld picture straight up. When I checked it, the patch was there, and larger. That's when I really started to worry. UFOs weren't even on my mind. I was out near Flagstaff with my friend Drew, camping in a remote area. Something strange happened that night that I can't shake. I tried calling my brother to talk, but there was no signal, not even a single bar, which was unusual for this location. I sat in the truck, letting it idle with the headlights off, watching the stars. I tried not to focus on a particular area of the sky, even though I couldn't actually see anything unusual. Around 3 a.m., the radio suddenly came on by itself, blaring static. I hadn't touched the volume, which was already turned down. Turning off the radio didn't help. A weird feeling of being watched grew stronger. I rolled down the window and looked outside again. The stars looked normal, but something felt fundamentally wrong. I grabbed my flashlight and walked about 20 feet into the scrubland to check my gear. The tracker was powered down, camera lens capped, everything exactly as I'd left it. But the tripod had shifted slightly, just a few inches to the left, with one leg sunk deeper, as if someone had grabbed and twisted it. I swept my flashlight around, but there were no footprints or disturbances in the ground. I packed the camera away and locked it in the truck. Sleep was impossible. I sat in the cab, windows up, constantly thinking about that undefined patch of sky. Not being able to see it somehow made it more unsettling, like it was only visible through the camera, but still present. When I got home, I examined the photos. In each image, a dark patch grew incrementally wider, just a few pixels each time, but enough to be noticeable. The stars inside this area disappeared completely. Increasing the contrast revealed a subtle rippling effect around the edges, like heat distortion. I tried editing the images, but the data simply wasn't there. It wasn't an exposure issue, the information was just missing. I printed the last photo and framed it in my office. Most people think it's a cool long exposure shot of the Milky Way, but I always see the empty hole where stars should be. I haven't returned to Red Mesa since that night. Something happened out there that I can't explain, and I'm not eager to find out more. We were camping up on a Forest Service road near what I think was called Frayne Prairie. Three of us, me, Drew, and Eric, set up in a basic clearing surrounded by pine trees, maybe 40 yards from the gravel road. I was 16, Drew was 17, and this was early August. The night was warm, but cooling quickly, like mountain evenings always do. We'd planned a 2-night trip before school started, bringing just the essentials: a shared tent, a cooler, sleeping bags, some snacks, and a Bluetooth speaker. No cell service, no bathrooms, just us in the wilderness. The first night passed normally. We stayed up late, telling stories and trying to spook each other. Eric kept pretending to hear branches breaking, but it was all just playful joking. Occasionally, a distant truck would rumble on the gravel road, but otherwise, we were completely alone. I remember falling asleep to the sound of cicadas and wind moving through the trees. The second night was different. I was tired and went to bed before Drew and Eric, maybe 15 or 20 minutes earlier. The temperature had dropped more than I expected. I pulled my hoodie over my head and drifted off, with Eric still playing with the campfire, tossing pine needles to make sparks. When I woke, something felt wrong. It was pitch black, not early morning dark, but complete darkness. No fire, no moonlight. The silence was absolute. No wind, no insects. I didn't sit up immediately, just stared at the tent's roof. Something felt off, a feeling I couldn't quite explain. The tent seemed colder than before. When I reached to pull my sleeping bag tighter, I realized it was already zipped to my chin, something I didn't remember doing. The air smelled musty, like a tent that had been packed away for a long time, replacing the clean pine scent we'd had earlier. I turned to check on Drew and Eric. Their sleeping bags were visible, but I couldn't see their faces. They were zipped up tight, lying unnaturally still. No breathing, no snoring, just complete unnatural silence. That's when I noticed something was off with the tent. The door was unzipped almost completely, not flapping, but definitely open like someone had entered or exited and never closed it. The mesh screen was also open, exposed to the dark woods. What struck me was the absolute silence. No footsteps, no branches cracking, not even a whisper of wind. My flashlight caught my attention. It was sitting just outside the tent, about 2 feet from the entrance, standing upright. The beam was pointed straight up, cutting through the darkness. I could see its faint glow through the tent flap. This was strange because I clearly remembered turning it off and placing it in the corner of the tent before going to bed. I hadn't gotten up since. I started whispering to my friends, first to Drew, then to Eric. "Hey, wake up." Nothing. I didn't want to leave the warmth of my sleeping bag, so I just lay there, heart pounding, feeling a heavy weight in my chest that seemed to pin me down. After a few minutes, I managed to sit up, shaking. I nudged Drew, then shook him harder, almost yelling his name. He finally jerked awake with a sharp inhale, looking around confused. When I asked if he'd unzipped the tent or used my flashlight, he just kept saying, "What?" Eric woke up similarly disoriented. Neither remembered hearing anything, and they couldn't explain the open tent. Drew suggested maybe I'd gone out to pee and forgotten to zip it, but I insisted I hadn't. I told them about the flashlight being on and standing outside, pointed at the sky. They seemed to brush it off, but I could see they were unsettled. Drew got up and zipped the door shut. Eric turned off the flashlight and tossed it back into the tent. We sat in silence, darkness surrounding us. I checked my watch, 3:41 a.m. Eventually, we lay back down, but I couldn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, listening for any sound. Nothing. When sunrise finally came, we packed up quickly. No one spoke, but we all wanted to leave. We didn't even stop for breakfast, just threw everything into our bags and got out of there. I was hauling refrigerated freight from Indianapolis to Salt Lake, a pretty standard run along I-80, the long, straight, boring route I prefer. It was a little after 3 in the morning, and I'd been on the road since around 9 the previous night. I was deep in that dead stretch between towns where everything's just fields and sky, not even billboards, just occasional mile markers and the hum of tires. I wasn't exactly tired. I'd had coffee in Grand Island and was zoning a bit, cruise control on, and talk radio turned down low, the kind of driving where you stop thinking about what you're doing. That's when I first noticed the lights west of Kearney, Nebraska. They were behind me, caught in the mirrors. 3 white dots, all the same size and brightness, spaced evenly apart. Not headlights, I was sure. Maybe a truck with weird running lights or something unusual being hauled, but they were too high up. At first, I thought maybe it was a plane banking slow or coming into alignment, but they stayed the same distance back, mile after mile. If it was a plane, it was keeping pace perfectly. After about 15 minutes, I started really watching. The spacing never changed. No blinking, no red or green nav lights. Just white, like stars, but too low and too bright with the moon out. They weren't moving forward, just floating back there. I tapped the brakes once, lightly, not enough to slow down much, just to see if they'd respond. Nothing changed. They held position, maybe half a mile back and slightly off the road to the left. No sound either. I rolled the window down to listen, but all I heard was wind and highway. It started bothering me. I'm used to weird stuff on the road. People driving without lights, deer standing in the middle of nowhere, even drones once or twice. But this felt different. There was no behavior I could dematch it to. If it was a plane, why stay fixed? Later, walking a mile back to the road after waiting for Drew's dad to pick us up, I asked again if either of them had messed with the tent or my flashlight. Both swore they hadn't. I checked the battery level later. It was almost full. Still don't know how it ended up standing upright or why it was on, or why none of us heard anything. I was driving late at night on a lonely county road with no services around. Something felt off from the start. A set of lights had been trailing me for what seemed like hours, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Around 3 a.m., I noticed these lights behind me. My first instinct was to pull over and see if they would follow, but something inside told me to keep driving. Every time I checked my mirrors, they were there, perfectly positioned, never wavering. At 4:06, I remember looking at the dashboard clock. I had planned to stop at a truck stop, but the persistent lights made me uneasy about getting out of the cab. Then suddenly, something bizarre happened. In an instant, the lights shifted sideways, not forward, not toward me, but horizontally across the sky. They moved faster than anything I'd ever seen, all 3 of them moving together like they were connected. They shot out over the open fields at a 45-degree angle and then stopped abruptly. I slowed down and hit the brakes. The lights remained motionless for about 10 seconds before shooting straight up and vanishing completely, not fading, just gone. I pulled onto the shoulder, left the engine running with hazard lights on, and looked out over the empty fields. No sound, no movement, just the faint orange glow of my dashboard and gravel crunching under my tires. Walking a short distance from the truck, I saw nothing. The sky was clear, the moon visible to the west, stars everywhere. I stood there for about 5 minutes, trying to make sense of what I'd just witnessed. Then I heard the engine stutter. Turning back, I checked the key and gear shift. I was still in neutral with brakes set. The dashboard lights flickered once, and then everything returned to normal. I got back in, shut the door, and continued driving. I was hiking the Pine Ridge Loop late one September afternoon, squeezing in a trail run after work before the days got too short. I hit the trailhead around 5:30, knowing I'd be racing sunset, but I had a headlamp in my pack and planned to turn back if it got dark. The first miles were typical. Dry trail, cool air, that quiet early autumn feeling. No bugs, minimal wind, just the sound of my boots and occasional scurrying squirrels. I passed only one other hiker heading back, earbuds in, and we exchanged a quick nod. By the time I reached the ridgeline, the sun was sinking below the valley's far side. I stopped at my usual spot, a flat rock outcrop facing west across trees and distant hills. It's a place I've rested before, typically alive with circling birds or glimpses of deer trails. But that evening was different, pure stillness. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was a drone, hovering around 150 feet above the opposite ridge. It wasn't moving, just suspended there, catching light in an unusual way, like metal underwater. Its shape was strange, not quite round or sharp, more like a stretched droplet. Unlike typical drones, this thing was perfectly motionless. Something felt off. No sound, no interaction with the sunset's vibrant orange and pink sky. Instead, it remained a flat gray presence. Curious, I pulled out my phone to zoom in and identify it. The moment I lifted the camera, everything went weird. The screen blurred completely, not just the object, but everything. Autofocus seemed broken, stuck at the wrong depth. Tapping the screen did nothing. Switching between photo and video modes made no difference. I kept watching, unsettled by this unexplained stillness hanging above the landscape. I stood there with the phone in my hand, totally still. The screen had gone dead after the battery dropped from 89% to 0% in an instant. No warning, no fade. For a solid minute, I didn't move or say anything, just stared across the ridge. The object remained exactly where it had been, but something felt different. Before it was just odd, now it felt like it was aware of me. I know how that sounds. I backed away slowly, not running, not turning my back. I moved downhill step by step, keeping it in sight until the trees blocked my view. The forest felt wrong. Not loud, not quiet, just wrong. No birds, no wind, just my footsteps and a faint, high-pitched ringing in my ears. I stopped and checked my pack, thinking maybe my headlamp or charger was on, but everything was off. The phone wouldn't respond when I pressed the power button. I started moving faster. The trail to the parking lot wasn't long, but it felt endless. I kept checking over my shoulder, though nothing was there. Just this weight in the air, like something was behind me. About a mile from the trailhead, I passed the wooden signpost for Trail 4A with its carved arrow. That's when the ringing stopped. Not faded, just ceased. Every hair on my arm stood up. I didn't stop. I reached the parking lot after the last light disappeared. My car was the only one left. I got in, locked the doors, and sat in silence, staring into the trees. My phone remained dead. I drove home, gripping the wheel too tight. The next morning, I plugged in my phone. It turned on normally, showing 82% battery. But when I checked my photos, nothing from the hike remained. My entire camera roll was gone. The last file's timestamp read 4:17 p.m., over an hour before I reached the ridge. The morning after that strange lightning event caught my attention. It wasn't really a storm, just a few sharp flashes around 2 or 3 a.m. with no thunder or rain, just enough light to wake me and set the dogs barking. I brushed it off as heat lightning, or maybe some transformer issues. Walking the north pasture the next morning around 7, doing my usual fence line check, something felt off. The property is mostly flat, about 4 acres of grazing field. We'd had a dry summer, so the grass was yellowing, but still thick. As I crested the small rise near the southeast corner, a peculiar sight stopped me. 50 yards out, a perfect 20-foot square sat dead center in the pasture. The color was wrong, a flat, dull gray, as if someone had completely drained the life from the grass. The edges were razor sharp, with perfect right angles and no blending. Approaching slowly, the area felt unnatural. The grass stood upright but was stiff and dry, almost like wire. When I touched a blade, it snapped between my fingers, brittle like plastic, not the usual crunch of dead grass. Despite the 80-degree morning sun, the square was noticeably cooler. No dew covered it, unlike the rest of the pasture. Pulling up the grass, the roots came out effortlessly. The exposed dirt looked pale and washed out, as if bleached. Most unsettling was the complete absence of life. No ants, no beetles, no worms. Digging a few inches down with my pocket knife revealed nothing living. The cows behaved strangely that day. Normally wandering freely, they clustered at the far end of the pasture, standing still and watching. Later, I tried bringing my 2 dogs out, usually curious about everything, but they reacted differently to this spot. Something was definitely not right in that field. The dogs stopped dead in their tracks when we got close, maybe 20 feet away. One started whining, tail tucked between her legs, while the other growled a low, steady warning, like he sensed something I couldn't. They both pulled back on their leashes, refusing to go any closer. The next day, the wind was gusty and dry, the kind that usually flattens tall grass into waves. But that gray square didn't budge. Not a single blade shifted around it. I stood watching for 10 minutes. Grass everywhere bent and swayed, yet this spot remained perfectly still, sealed off from its surroundings. I didn't rush to tell anyone. Partly, I thought it might disappear on its own. Partly, I didn't want to sound crazy. I took a phone photo, but it didn't capture what I saw. The image looked like a shadow, darker, where the grass seemed matted down. A few nights later, a constant buzzing woke me. Not loud, but like static or distant power lines. I thought something might be wrong with the barn's breaker panel. Flashlight in hand, I discovered the sound wasn't coming from the barn, but the pasture. Following it to the ridge, the sound suddenly stopped, as if someone flipped a switch. The square was glowing. Not bright, just a faint pale shimmer like moonlight on frost. It wasn't casting light or shadows. The grass itself gave off a weird, soft white-blue glow. I stood about 50 feet away, staring. I didn't approach. Not out of fear exactly, but a strange pressure, like I wasn't supposed to get closer. After a few minutes, the glow faded. The buzzing returned briefly, then cut out again. I walked back to the house without looking back. The next morning, I found 3 fence posts snapped clean at the base on that side. Something had pushed through without leaving tracks or footprints. The cows were huddled together at the far end, wide-eyed. One had a long, shallow cut on its side, too clean and smooth to be a typical fence injury. The vet patched her up, confirming it wasn't a normal wound. I put up temporary fencing, unsettled by the whole situation. A couple of strands of electric wire marked the square's boundary. I didn't want to forget where it started. About a week later, something new appeared in the center of the square. The grass had settled into a precise spiral, folded clockwise. It started tight at the center and widened outward, so perfectly even you'd think someone used a rake and compass. This wasn't a gradual change. It simply wasn't there in the morning, but by late afternoon, the pattern was fully formed. That night, I sat on the porch keeping watch. Around 2:30, the buzzing returned, louder than before. It wasn't painful, just a steady, low vibration that seemed to come from underground. I watched the field. No lights, no shapes, just the sound. Suddenly, the porch light flickered and went out, followed by the barn's floodlight. Everything went dark and quiet, except for the persistent buzzing. After 10 or 15 minutes, everything switched back on at once. Lights, fridge, ceiling fan. When I walked to the field's edge, I couldn't see anything, but I felt a strange pressure. The air seemed heavier around the square. The next day, the spiral was gone, replaced by a grid laid into the grass itself. Perfect square sections, each about 2 feet wide, arranged like a chessboard. Every square was the same gray color, but with alternating textures, some flat, some standing straight up. Over the next 3 weeks, the anomaly began to fade. Color returned slowly, like water soaking through paper. The texture softened, bugs reappeared, and a bird landed near the edge without incident. The dog stopped growling when we approached. One morning, it was just grass again, slightly paler but alive. No spiral, no grid, no glow. It never spread, never returned. Yet sometimes when I walk the fence early in the morning, I get a metallic taste in my mouth. I'd been hiking alone for a few hours, just me and the trail late summer with early evening light, the sun starting to dip, but still plenty bright. I was heading up this ridge in a national forest. I knew well remote enough that I didn't expect to see anyone else. I just needed some time away from everything. The hike wasn't special, just typical forest sounds, birds calling, wind through pines, insects buzzing. I remember thinking how nice the weather held up, no rain in sight, a steady pace stopping to catch my breath, and looked back at the valley below, the air thick with pine needles and dirt scents, the light softening as the sun sank lower when it got close to the ridge's top. Something felt different. Usually there's wind and birds circling overhead, maybe a squirrel darting through trees, but this time nothing, absolute silence. The kind that makes your ears ring because your brain craves some sound to stop, and looked around expecting ambient forest noise, but heard nothing at first. It thought maybe it was just a calm moment before a storm, so I stood listening. That's when a faint hum appeared, barely noticeable, almost like white noise, but then growing clearer. Strange thing was it wasn't coming from any direction, just filling the air, evenly, like the whole ridge was vibrating. It put my hand over my mouth, trying to block the sound and focus on something natural, but the hum persisted low and stacked. It felt like it was vibrating through the air. I started feeling weird buzzing in my teeth, like my fillings were vibrating in sync with the sound, subelite first, then jetting stronger later. I stopped grazing animals in that field, let the grass grow tall, wind pushing it around normally. Nothing strange has happened since, but I kept the temporary fence up just in case weird, metallic taste lingers. Sometimes I fig at my mouth near that spot like a bit and foil goes away after a few seconds. No sound, no lights, just that strange sensation. The forest around me was eerily silent. No birds chirped, no branches cracked, no chipmunks scurried, just an unnerving hum that seemed to fill the air. I'm not easily spooked, but something felt off. My teeth started buzzing, and a strange pressure built in my head. I pulled out my phone to check for any weather alerts or unusual conditions. Weak signal, but still present. Surprising given how remote this ridge was. When I took a few steps forward, the hum pulsed louder. The space around me felt different, almost thick like walking through water, except the ground looked completely normal. I tried calling out. No answer, no echo, just absolute silence. The constant hum made it hard to concentrate, and I felt increasingly dizzy. Something told me I shouldn't sit down. I needed to move. So I started descending the trail slowly and carefully. Gradually, sound returned. First a distant bird call, then leaves rustling in a breeze. The hum faded like someone turning down a volume dial. My teeth stopped buzzing, and the pressure in my head lifted. By the time I reached the bottom, the forest was alive again. Bugs chirping, birds singing, wind whispering through the trees. About 20 minutes had passed. When I told others about the experience, they laughed it off. Probably just radio interference, they said. But the memory of that unsettling silence stayed with me. Nate and I were out on the back porch on a crisp September night in Colorado. The air carried a hint of wood smoke, and the sky was so dark it felt heavy. We had this old telescope from a yard sale, one of those bulky ones with a big lens and tripod. It was Nate's first real time using it, and I was helping him get set up. We started by aiming at Jupiter. Nate was excited, squinting through the eyepiece, trying to spot the tiny moons. I took a turn too, and we talked about how incredible it was that something so distant could look so close through the lens. The night was quiet, broken only by the soft creaking of the telescope as we adjusted its angle. Then Nate spotted something. "Hey, look at that," he said, pointing west. Through the eyepiece, I saw a tiny black dot moving slowly across our field of view. Everything felt strange immediately. It was moving opposite to how stars typically drift, going west to east instead of east to west. I blinked, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe a bird? An insect? But it didn't match anything familiar. The shape was too small to make out details, and it moved with an unnervingly smooth, steady glide. No flickering, no light reflection, just a solid black smudge drifting steadily. We watched intently for 2 or 3 minutes. "Want to try tracking it?" I asked. Nate nodded. As I slowly turned the telescope to follow the dot, something bizarre happened. The moment I moved the scope, the black dot completely vanished. Not a fade, not a blink, just gone. We scanned the surrounding area, sweeping a wide arc with the telescope. Nothing. The stars continued their usual drift, but the mysterious black shape had disappeared without a trace. Was it a trick of light? An optical illusion? I couldn't be sure. Something about that moment on the ridge felt off, like we'd glimpsed something existing between worlds. I haven't been back to that spot since. Not yet. I'd been staying at this old cabin way out in the woods with my wife Sarah and our dog Max, the kind of place with no cell service and no neighbors for miles. Just trees and silence. We'd gone there to get away from everything. No distractions, no noise, just us in the forest. The night before it happened was quiet. We went to bed early, tired from hiking during the day. Max curled up at the foot of the bed like usual. I remember thinking how peaceful it was, that feeling like nothing could go wrong out there. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night because I felt weird. Later that evening, Nate and I were stargazing with a telescope, and something caught our attention. I checked the eyepiece and lens carefully. No smudges, no bugs, nothing. Nate looked at me with wide eyes. "Did you see that?" "Yeah, I did." We spent the next hour trying to find it again. I even pulled out my phone to record video through the eyepiece. We caught the usual stars and a few satellites passing overhead, but never that black dot. It felt weird, like whatever we saw was deliberately avoiding being seen again. At one point, I noticed the usual nighttime sounds had gone quiet. Crickets, distant dogs, the hum of a car on the highway. Not all at once, but gradually over the hour. It was strange enough that I mentioned it to Nate, who said he'd noticed it too. It was like the world outside the porch had pulled back, leaving just the two of us in the night sky. I tried to shake the feeling, told Nate to keep an eye out and that maybe we'd catch it again next time. But something about the way it moved stuck with me. Not like any plane or drone I'd seen. Too slow, too silent and moving in a direction opposite to the stars. That night when I went to bed, I kept thinking about it, the way it just disappeared when we tried to focus on it, and how the sounds around us had faded out like we were alone in the dark. The next day, I checked the news for any reports of strange aircraft or unusual activity around the area. Nothing. No missing planes, no military exercises, no weather balloons. Weeks passed, and I told a couple of friends who were into stargazing. They just shrugged and suggested it was maybe a satellite glitch or something caught in the optics. I don't know. It felt different, like we saw something that wasn't supposed to be there and maybe didn't want to be noticed. I haven't gone back out with the telescope at night since, not yet anyway. The night felt strange from the moment I woke up. Something was off, but I couldn't pinpoint what. The room seemed darker than usual, and when I reached for my phone to check the time, the screen was black with no signal. Sarah was still asleep, and Max lay quietly at the foot of the bed, appearing completely undisturbed. Unable to shake the uneasy feeling, I decided to get a glass of water from the kitchen. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong. The entire living room had been rearranged. The couch had moved about 4 feet closer to the window. The coffee table was flipped sideways. Chairs were pushed out of place, and the bookshelf against the wall had been rotated 90 degrees. Nothing was damaged or broken, but it was clear that someone, or something, had been moving furniture around. I woke Sarah, who initially looked at me like I was crazy, but as we investigated, she agreed something was definitely off. The kitchen showed similar signs of disturbance. The table was rearranged, chairs weren't in their original positions, and even the stove knobs seemed slightly turned. What made the situation truly bizarre was the lack of any evidence of an intruder. No doors were open, no windows broken, and no footprints suggested forced entry. Both the front and back doors remained locked. Max hadn't moved from the bed and showed no signs of alarm, no barking, no growling, just peaceful sleep. I went outside to investigate. The yard was undisturbed, with no tracks or signs of anyone approaching. The forest was unnaturally quiet, with no wind or animal sounds. The night air felt heavy, as if holding its breath. We tried to rationalize the situation, wondering if we had somehow forgotten where we'd placed things, but we knew exactly where the furniture had been before. We weren't children who might accidentally move things in our sleep. Something inexplicable had happened. We spent the rest of the night wide awake, listening intently, but hearing nothing except Max's steady breathing. When morning came, sunlight filled the cabin and everything appeared normal again. We checked the furniture one last time. It was still in those strange, displaced positions. Strange positions. I started snapping pictures with my phone just to have some record. We joked half-heartedly about something felt off from the start. Max wasn't acting like himself at all. Normally, he'd be the first to panic at anything unusual, but this time, he was eerily calm. We were just sitting there, trying to laugh it off as maybe some ghost story, but deep down, we both knew something wasn't right. The furniture had been moved. Subtly, but definitely moved. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, nothing to suggest anyone had been inside. Yet something had clearly been there. I kept looking back at the cabin as we drove away, catching glimpses in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw a shadow move just beyond the tree line, but when I blinked, it vanished. I still can't explain what happened. Was it real or just some half-remembered dream? Max would never be this calm if something truly strange wasn't going on. The pictures I took were the only proof I had that something weird had occurred. The blackout happened suddenly, like someone had flipped a massive switch. Thursday night, just after 9 p.m., everything went dark. The electrical hum disappeared, and an unusual silence settled over the street. I was on the couch, phone in hand, when the screen died and the room plunged into complete darkness. Neighbors started emerging, some with flashlights, others just standing in their doorways. Kids shouted with excitement, treating the power outage like an adventure. When I stepped outside, Mr. Jensen was already on his porch, staring intently toward the tree line. That's when I saw it, a strange blue light hovering above the tallest trees. It wasn't like a normal light. This was different. It pulsed gently, almost like it was breathing, completely silent. No buzzing, no flickering, just a steady, rhythmic glow that seemed almost alive. Mr. Jensen and I exchanged a look. No words were needed. Something extraordinary was happening. No one expected anything unusual when the blue light appeared. A quiet group gathered in the dark, faces illuminated by its glow. Someone made a half-hearted joke about alien spaceships, but no one laughed. We just watched, feeling unsettled. My phone wouldn't work. The screen stayed black when I tried to take a photo or record video. Other neighbors experienced the same thing, phones refusing to capture anything, screens remaining stubbornly dark. The power had been out for about 30 minutes. The blue light remained motionless, never changing shape or color. It pulsed, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but always present. People started checking watches, trying to pass the time. Some neighbors retreated inside, uneasy but still curious. Something else struck me. The night had gone completely silent. No crickets, no wind, no distant traffic sounds. It felt like the entire neighborhood was suspended in an invisible bubble. I mentioned this to Lisa, who lived across the street, and she agreed. The world seemed to have paused. When the lights returned, everything changed instantly. The blue light vanished. Street lights buzzed back to life. TVs flickered on in houses and phones started working again. People checked messages, exchanging knowing glances. We'd all experienced something inexplicable. The next day, some neighbors talked about strange memory gaps during the outage. Minutes seemed to be missing or jumbled. The local utility company claimed it was routine maintenance, lasting exactly 30 minutes, with no mention of anything unusual. I kept thinking about that blue light. It wasn't a plane, drone, or emergency signal. It made no sound, didn't move, and couldn't be captured by any device. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't, as if it never wanted to be noticed. I haven't shared this story much. I have no explanations, just a vivid memory of a neighborhood suspended in an unexplained blue glow, a moment that defies understanding. The forest was quiet that evening, a crisp air nipping at my lungs as I sat on a fallen log near the ridgeline. Hours into my deer hunt, something caught my eye, a shadow against the darkening sky that didn't belong. It moved like nothing I'd seen before, a massive V-shaped form gliding silently overhead, which was odd because something that size should make noise. As a veteran who'd seen plenty of strange things overseas, I knew this was different. No sound, no lights, just a smooth, deliberate movement across the sky. The craft rotated subtly, almost like it was scanning the landscape. I pulled out my binoculars and studied it closely. Its surface was a dull mat that seemed to absorb what little light remained, bigger than any local aircraft I recognized, easily twice the wingspan of a small plane. Around this strange object, the world felt unnaturally still. No birds, no insects, just a complete absence of the usual forest sounds. I watched intently until it disappeared behind the ridge, the entire encounter lasting maybe 15 minutes. Something felt off. The forest seemed heavier, more oppressive. My dog Max, usually quick to bark at any unusual noise, was unusually quiet and stayed close. On my walk back to camp, I noticed my trail markers, small pieces of tape I'd placed on branches, were completely missing. Not fallen, not blown away, just gone. I kept glancing over my shoulder, feeling watched, uncertain of what I'd just witnessed. I've been hunting this area for years, and nothing like that night had ever happened before. The campfire spot where I'd left my gear looked exactly the same. Everything was in its place. The fire pit was cold, which made sense, but a strange smell lingered in the air. It was like ozone mixed with something metallic, and I couldn't pinpoint its source. Max was acting weird, moving in tight circles on the ground as if tracking something, invisible. I tried to shrug it off, thinking maybe my imagination was playing tricks after seeing that strange light. But sleep didn't come easy that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that V-shaped object drifting silently across the sky, tilting as if watching me. The next morning, I noticed a small circular mark on my arm, pale red like a bug bite, but oddly shaped. I checked Max, but he seemed fine. At first, I didn't think much of it, maybe a spider bite or tick, but the mark didn't itch or hurt. It just sat there, looking out of place. Back home, I scanned local news for any similar reports. A few mentions of strange lights that night, but nothing concrete. No official aircraft sightings, no weather balloon explanations. When I tried telling friends, they laughed it off. Probably a drone, they said. But I know what I saw. It wasn't a drone, too big, too slow, too quiet, and that rotation was unlike anything I'd seen before. Sometimes, when I'm outside at night, I catch a glimpse of a shadow moving overhead. No sound, no lights, just a shape drifting. I can't be sure it's the same thing, but it feels like that V is still out there, watching. I haven't returned to that ridge since. Too many questions, not enough answers. We were working a routine environmental survey in a remote valley. Just a few days mapping plant growth and tracking soil changes with a drone. The area was completely empty. No houses, no roads, just wide open land with some scrub and low hills. Perfect for our work. I was flying the drone while my partner Lisa handled data collection. We'd set the drone to hover over specific spots for thermal scans, always thorough in our approach. We were about halfway through the survey on the third day when something caught my eye. The drone was flying over a broad, flat part of the valley, Sector C, according to our GPS coordinates. It should have been hovering around 200 feet above the ground, just like always. That evening, while reviewing the data, I spotted something strange on the thermal feed. A weird shape hung suspended in the middle of the valley, precisely at 200 feet. It didn't resemble anything natural. No animal heat signatures, no known sources. Just a smooth, dark shape hanging completely motionless. The truly bizarre part came when I pulled up the drone's live video footage from the same moment. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just an empty valley with some rocks and scattered bushes. No shadows, no reflections, nothing at all. I ran the footage repeatedly, checking timestamps, adjusting brightness and contrast. The thermal image remained crystal clear. The shape was definitely there, but the visual camera showed nothing. Lisa got intrigued, diving into the technical details. She examined the drone's sensor data logs and discovered something even more peculiar. The thermal sensor detected an object with zero heat output. Zero. Normally, even a sun-warmed rock would register some heat. This was different, like a heat-absorbing void. We returned the next day, attempting to capture it live. We flew the drone over Sector C at the same altitude, but nothing appeared on either camera or thermal sensors. Just emptiness. That night, reviewing the footage again, the shape seemed to subtly shift between frames, almost as if watching us, though that could have been my imagination. The rest of the week passed uneventfully. The valley remained quiet, the drone functioned normally, yet the shape lingered in my thoughts. What troubled me most was the timing. Checking the drone's flight logs revealed a strange 5-minute gap where the GPS signal dropped and the drone drifted slightly off course. The mysterious shape appeared precisely during that interval. The drone's software claimed everything was fine, but the logs told a different story. Lisa and I debated whether to report it. The agency demanded solid proof, and we possessed only glitchy data featuring a ghostly thermal image. No video evidence, no other sensor confirmations, just that one inexplicable shape, silent silhouette haunting the valley, a presence that felt like a held breath. Something was watching us, not with hostility, but with an unsettling stillness. My drone footage still unsettles me. The shape never moves like anything natural. It just hangs there, silent and cold, visible only through heat, yet generating no warmth at all. Whatever we captured wasn't meant to be seen, which might explain why the camera never truly revealed it. My night shift at the office complex was routine, a standard security job, nothing extraordinary, just watching cameras and making occasional rounds. The building was typical, big parking lot, scattered offices, mostly empty spaces, quiet most nights. This particular night began normally. I clocked in around 11 p.m., grabbed coffee, and settled into the small security office. Banks of monitors displayed entrances, hallways, parking lot, usually just static views of empty spaces and dark asphalt. Occasional late-night cars or workers, but nothing remarkable. Around 1:30 a.m., I was scanning parking lot cameras. Clear night, starlit, lot mostly empty with about a dozen cars. Something strange caught my eye on the main camera, a shadow moving over vehicles, but not like a natural cloud shadow. This had a distinct triangular shape, moving unnaturally. Most peculiar, no motion sensors triggered. The lot's sensitive lights remained off as this dark triangle glided smoothly above parked cars. I leaned closer, watching it slide from the lot's far corner toward the building. Steady, soundless, casting no light, reflecting nothing. Then abruptly, the feed cut. Black. Completely. Other cameras worked fine, but the main lot view vanished. The monitor's clock showed the feed was dead precisely 12 seconds. No glitch, no static, just blank. When it came back, the shadow was gone. The parking lot looked normal again, and all the lights were back to their usual off state. I stared at the screen for a minute, trying to figure out if it was a camera malfunction. But the other cameras where the feed timing was weird, exactly 12 seconds down, no less like something had interrupted the signal on purpose, or maybe cut the feed. After that, it started scanning the footage frame by frame, rewinding and playing slow motion. The shadow was definitely there before the blackout, moving away, no airplane. Could end after the blackout. There was no sign of it, no changes in the parking lot, no damage, no cars moving or anything. I called the day shift supervisor the next morning, asked if anyone had been in or out overnight, or if they knew anything about the cameras cutting. He said nothing unusual was reported in other camera issues. The system logs didn't show any errors or tampering either that whole night. I kept checking the cameras, expecting something else, but nothing like that happened again. The rest of my shift was pretty uneventful, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, like something was hovering just out of sight. You don't know what that shadow was. I don't know why. The cameras cut out exactly when it passed, and I don't know why the motion sensors never triggered it. Didn't make a sound. I didn't leave a trace, just appeared for a few minutes, then disappeared like it wasn't there at all, like twerking nights after that. But I avoided that camera angle whenever I could. Something about that triangle, the way it moved, and the silence around it just didn't feel right. It happened about 4 years ago. Mid-October, it was dry. Ving back from my brother's place outside of Jackson. He'd invited me over to help fix a busted fence post on his property, and we ended up having a couple beers after. I wasn't drunk or anything, 2 bottles. Over the course of 3 hours, just tired, I left around 10:30. Figured I'd be home by a little after midnight. It's about a 90-minute drive, mostly back roads. It took Route 43 the same way. I always do that stretch between Pine Hollow and Lakewood. Gets real quiet at night. It's all woods and farmland. And you can go 15 minutes without seeing another set of headlights. There's one gas station halfway, but it's usually closed by 9. I had the radio on low, just enough to fill the silence. I remember checking the time at 11:47. I was driving late on a rock station when Wicked Game started playing, which struck me right before I came around this familiar bend past mile marker 242, where the shoulder drops into a ditch. Suddenly my ears felt this weird pressure, like rapid altitude change, not painful, just sudden. And then they popped exactly like in an airplane. Simultaneously, every single hair on my arms and neck stood up for goosebumps, no exaggeration. The road seemed to shift without warning, or Jolt didn't swerve or lose traction. I just blinked and everything changed. Ass abruptly on a straightaway about 4 or 5 miles from where I had been moments earlier. I recognized the landscape immediately, a crooked mailbox with reflectors on the left, and a busted wooden fence on the right. Both landmarks were exactly where they should be. But something felt deeply wrong when I glanced at the dashboard clock. It read 12:04, 17 minutes had vanished into thin air as load down and pulled onto the shoulder, putting the car in park. The engine idled while I stared at the clock, hoping it might somehow correct itself. It didn't. My phone confirmed the same time to 5. I was fully alert and positioned at 10 and 2 with clear memories of the bend, the song, and the ear pressure, but nor recollection of how I'd traveled those miles. The gas gauges showed slight movements, suggesting continuous driving. No tiddling. I stepped out with a flashlight scanning the road. No skid marks. No signs of impact. No animals or debris. Just darkness and a few bugs against the windshield at home. I sat in the driveway for 15 minutes. Processing what had happened was not sick or disoriented, just unsettled, hoping some memory would surface, but nothing came. Just that inexplicable jump from one moment to another. Next morning, I checked my car's mileage. Everything lined up. I hadn't skipped distance, only time, leaving me with more questions than answers about that strange midnight drive. I'd been working a late shift at the diner, walking home through the quiet neighborhood near town's edge. Just after midnight, the cold night felt stretched thin, with street lights flickering uncertainly. My headphones were on, music low, mostly to drown out the eerie wind sounds. Something caught my attention above the field beside the road. A shape hung suspended about 20 feet up. A metallic object, unlike any helicopter or drone I'd seen. It was silvery and oval-shaped, with subtle dents or panels that didn't reflect the streetlights normally. I stopped, pulled out an earbud, and stared. The object remained motionless, hovering silently despite the wind blowing around it. A few nights later, I drove that same stretch of road, windows cracked and radio off. I wasn't sure what I was seeking, maybe confirmation or just to understand what I'd experienced. Nothing seemed unusual at first, just an empty road, my headlights catching gravel and roadside weeds. Near mile marker 214, something looked different. On the right shoulder, a 6-foot wide patch of gravel appeared disturbed, smoothed in an even pattern that didn't match the surrounding road. No tire tracks, no footprints, just this strange wiped area. I didn't stop, just kept driving. I'd noticed odd things before. The night of the sighting, they were playing Chris Isaak right before midnight. Strange timing I couldn't shake. The pressure in my ears felt unusual, like something had shifted in the air. I'd even researched barometric pressure and weather events, but nothing explained what I'd experienced. One lingering oddity, my dashboard clock. It's been consistently off since that night, drifting further from my phone's time each week. I've reset it 3 times, but it won't stay synchronized. Maybe it means nothing, but it definitely wasn't like this before. There was no sound, not even a motor or a hum, just the wind around it. When I tried to snap a picture with my phone, the screen kept flickering before going completely black. It was as if the device didn't want to capture what I was seeing. Slowly, the object began to drift upward, disappearing behind the trees. I stood there for a long time, feeling like I was forgetting something important, but couldn't put my finger on what. After calling the police, I learned someone else had reported strange lights in the same area. They promised to send someone to investigate. About 40 minutes later, a patrol car arrived. Together, we walked out to the spot where I had seen the object. What we found was a patch of grass, blackened and scorched. But this wasn't a typical burn. No ashes, no char marks. The grass looked dead, as if fried by an intense heat. No debris, no footprints, just a scorched circle about 6 feet wide. The officer gave me a skeptical look, like I was fabricating the entire story. When we returned to the spot I'd pointed out, nothing remained except the dead grass. He asked if I wanted to come to the station and file a report, which I did. Even while recounting the events, something felt off, like my memory was playing tricks on me. On the drive home, I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see it again, but there was nothing, just streetlights and dark fields stretching into the distance. The next day, I returned to the field in daylight. Green shoots were already emerging through the dead spot, and there were no strange tracks or marks in the dirt. I tried sharing the story with friends, but they brushed it off as a weird weather phenomenon or someone playing a prank. I wanted to believe them, but something about the absolute silence and the object's movement didn't feel right. At night, lying in bed, I'd think about how my phone had died when I tried to film it, as if it didn't want to be seen or recorded. I don't know what it was or why it was there. I'm not even certain it was real. But the scorched grass is tangible proof, the one thing I can't explain. I work at a small auto repair shop in a quiet town that doesn't see much traffic. It's the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, but nobody seems to know anything about what I saw that night. Every day is pretty standard in the auto shop. Fixing brakes, changing oil, dealing with the occasional worn-out engine. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then one late afternoon, everything changed. A farmer I didn't know well stopped by, looking visibly shaken. He described something he'd seen over his field, a shiny disc hovering silently above his crops. I knew this guy, and he wasn't the type to make up stories. Still, it sounded crazy. Strange things started happening in the shop soon after. Small electrical oddities at first, my digital clock flickering, then going completely dark. The radio began cutting out with weird static. I tried to brush it off as old wiring, but then the computer started freezing. The cordless phone died mysteriously, and when I was closing up one night, the entire electrical system seemed to pulse. The lights dimmed slowly, as if someone was adjusting a non-existent dimmer. It was seriously unsettling. I mentioned these incidents to my regular customers, hoping for a rational explanation. Nothing. Then the local radio station reported another similar sighting, a silent, glowing G-object near the woods. The story got brief attention, but quickly faded. Meanwhile, my shop's electronics continued to malfunction. Tools that had worked perfectly for years would suddenly stop. My phone lost signal inside the shop, but worked fine outside. The scanner testing car computers began displaying bizarre glitches and what looked like distorted symbols. Something was definitely not right, and it all traced back to that farmer's initial report of a strange disc in the sky. That afternoon, outside by the back garage door, a low hum caught my attention. It wasn't coming from any machine or wire, just a deep, constant sound filling the air around me. The sky was clear, pale blue with a few clouds, offering no explanation. Later that evening, while fixing a customer's old pickup, my phone buzzed with a single-word text from the farmer. I tried calling back, but he didn't answer. Something felt off, so I decided to check on his place after closing the shop. A few miles down a narrow dirt road past fields and barns, I arrived at the quiet farm. No lights, no signs of life. Walking toward the field, the air felt heavy, charged with static electricity. The grass stood completely still, without a hint of breeze. Then I saw it, a faint glow hovering just above the corn stalks. A pale, silvery disc about 20 feet across, hanging motionless. No sound, no engines, nothing. When I tried to take a picture, my phone camera froze. As I stepped closer, the grass crackled with static electricity. The glow began to fade, not blinking or flickering, but thinning like smoke dissipating. Within minutes, it vanished completely. The empty field suddenly felt colder. Driving back, my dashboard lights dimmed and flickered. The radio was pure static, even on strong stations. Back at the shop, everything seemed normal, but something felt wrong. Over the next few days, strange interference increased. Electronics went haywire. Compasses near the farm spun wildly. Street lights by the shop flickered, though the power company claimed no issues. A low, pulsing hum returned, sometimes through the shop walls, sometimes outside, just quiet enough to make me uneasy. The farmer stopped returning calls. I hesitated to discuss it with anyone in town. One night, leaving the shop late, I thought I glimpsed a shadow moving, just at the edge of my vision. Beyond the tree line at the edge of the parking lot, something felt off. A sense of being watched crept in, like an unseen presence just out of sight. I climbed into the truck and started the engine. The radio was dead again. That weekend, I decided to head home early. Driving out of town, the sky was clear with stars overhead. As I passed the farm, a faint light blinked near the barn, low and steady, unlike any normal porch light. Then it vanished. Back home, the feeling lingered. Whatever was out there didn't seem to have left. A few days later, the shop's electronics stopped acting up as quietly as they had started. No one talked about the lights or strange hums. I kept thinking about the shiny disc the farmer saw, how the town's electronics seemed to glitch around that area, and the way the light just disappeared. I didn't know what it was, but I knew something was watching, and it wasn't planning to introduce itself. Last fall, I worked night shifts at a gas station just off the highway. It was a typical job, drunks buying beer, truckers grabbing snacks, occasional late-night travelers. But something strange began happening a few weeks in. Every night at 2:17 a.m., a silver sedan would pull up and park across the street. Not in any parking spot, but right under an old street lamp. The weird part? Nobody ever got out. The engine would turn off, headlights go dark, and the car would sit there, silent and empty. I first noticed it during a cigarette break. The street lamp's glow made the car's paint look almost metallic, polished to a mirror finish. Tinted windows revealed empty seats each time I looked. At first, I thought someone might be hiding, waiting, or maybe the car was stolen and abandoned. But it was always pristine. No dust, no leaves, no signs of being left for days. It arrived precisely at 2:17 a.m., almost like clockwork. The sedan always appeared at the same time, 2:17 a.m., right across the street from the gas station where I worked. At first, I wasn't sure if I was really seeing something or just imagining things during my long night shifts. I mentioned it to a few coworkers and regulars, but no one else had noticed the car. One chilly night, curiosity got the better of me. After locking up the station, I walked slowly across the street. The highway hummed softly in the distance, and crickets chirped quietly. The car sat perfectly still, looking completely ordinary. I circled it carefully, checking for anything unusual. The tires were fully inflated, the windshield spotless, with no scratches or dents. I peered inside and called out, "Hey, is someone there?" Nothing. The street remained silent except for my own breathing. Something felt off, like I was being watched from the darkness beyond the streetlight's reach. A few nights later, I decided to record the car on my phone. When I checked the footage the next morning, everything looked strange. The car arrived at 2:17 a.m. as always, but the street lamps seemed to dim slightly around it. The air looked distorted, shimmering like heat rising from pavement, except it was a cold night. About a week later, something even stranger happened. The car appeared at its usual time, and this time I caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure moving behind the windshield. I froze, unsure if I'd really seen anything or if my mind was playing tricks on me. The figure didn't move or get out. It just sat there, watching. I tried to rationalize what I was experiencing, but deep down, I knew something unexplainable was happening right outside my workplace. Every night at the same time, the car would arrive at the station, and something about it always felt off. The first time I noticed anything strange, there was a motionless figure inside. Definitely human-shaped, maybe a man, but I couldn't be certain. It sat facing forward, never moving, never acknowledging me. For 5 long minutes, I watched, my heart racing like I was somehow intruding just by looking. Then suddenly, without warning, the figure vanished. One blink, and it was gone. I rushed outside to check, but the car was empty, with no one anywhere nearby. That's when the weird things started happening. Faint tapping sounds began echoing through the station late at night, like someone was knocking on the walls. I'd investigate, but no one was ever there. Sometimes the fluorescent lights would flicker, and once the power cut out for exactly 30 seconds, with no storms or reported outages. When the lights returned, the car would be gone, leaving me alone with an unsettling feeling of being watched. I tried to rationalize it, maybe a prank, or something messing with the wiring, but the sensation never went away. One night, I decided to confront whatever was happening. When the car arrived, I stepped outside and called out, "Who are you? What do you want?" Nothing responded. The car just sat there, silent and empty. My nerves eventually got the better of me, and I retreated back to the station, locking the door. After that night, the car kept arriving at the same time, but the figure never reappeared. Sometimes I'd catch what seemed like distant headlights, like someone watching me, but whenever I looked directly, nothing was there. The strangest incident happened on my final night. Around 2:17 a.m., the car pulled up, but the street lamp above it went completely dark. Only the gas station sign across kept the street offered any faint glow. I waited, watching for any sign of movement. Suddenly, the car just vanished, not driving away, but simply disappearing. One moment it existed, the next it was gone. I stepped outside, looking for any evidence. No tire tracks, no signs of movement. It was as if the car had dissolved into thin air. I told the manager I was done. The sleepless nights and constant feeling of being watched were too much. Though I never saw the car again after quitting, sometimes when driving late at night past that highway stretch, I could swear I glimpsed something silver sitting under that old street lamp, waiting for 2:17 a.m. The fire was raging on a Tuesday afternoon, deep in a national forest where trees grows, so dense you can barely glimpse. The Skyworld fire crew of 6 had been dispatched from the nearest station to keep the blaze from spreading to nearby towns who were used to being coated in soot and sweat with smoke constantly hanging in the air. We'd been working the fire line for about 4 hours, setting up hoses and digging breaks. The wind kept shifting, which made everyone uneasy. The forest was dry and we knew how quickly flames could get out of control. We were positioned near a ridge where smoke was thick. It blocked out sunlight. Everything looked orange and hazy like a permanent twilight around 7 p.m. As the sky started darkening, Jesse called out something strange in the smoke above the ridge. Initially thought it might be a helicopter or plane dropping water, but aerial support had stopped hours earlier. This wasn't a blinking searchlight or anything familiar. It was a steady white light about 10 feet across, hanging motion. Less in the thick smoke. The light moved slowly downward and then stopped completely. Wall went, silent, just staring the smoke around it, twisted and curled almost like it was alive, while the fire continued burning around its edges. Nobody could explain what we were seeing. Jesse was certain it wasn't drone or anything from Forest Services, but we were all equally confused. For 5 or 6 minutes, the light remained completely still, not pulsing or flickering. Then suddenly it began rising, first slowly, then rapidly disappearing into the smoke above the ridge. What happened next was truly bizarre. We realized the fire directly beneath where the light had hovered. Red wasps completely extinguished in a perfect 50-foot circle inside this ring. The forest looked completely untouched, as if nothing had ever burned. We were out there when the fires swept through, leaving a strange, clean line between burned and unburned ground. Our team kept checking the edges, expecting something to happen, but nothing did. The fire had stopped completely, like an invisible boundary was holding it back. Radio communication was tough. Static made it hard to get through, and when we finally connected, Base told us to hold position and wait for the night crew. We set up camp near the edge, watching the orange sky and thick smoke. Everyone was unusually quiet. No jokes, no explanations about what we'd seen. That night, I couldn't sleep. A low hum underneath the fire's crackling sounded like a distant engine. Early morning, I walked back to the fire ring. Inside, the air felt cooler, and the smoke smell was almost gone. Something caught my eye. The trees just inside the ring looked different. Their bark was smoother and leaves a deeper green. Subtle, but unmistakable. I mentioned it to the crew, but nobody seemed to notice or care. The day dragged on. Incoming fire crews reinforced fire breaks, but the boundary remained perfect. When we finally left and the smoke cleared, that circular line stood out starkly against the blackened forest. Since then, I've researched satellite images and fire reports. Officially, it was just a standard wildfire. But I'm not convinced. Sometimes at night, I hear that faint, distant hum. Occasionally, I catch movement in the forest shadows. Not an animal, not a person, but something else watching. We were camping near the Mojave, about 20 miles off the main highway. Early April meant days weren't too hot and nights were chilly but bearable. This was our first desert trip after mostly camping up north. My Forerunner rolled down an old service road cutting through open BLM land. No signs, no fences, just vast emptiness. After leaving the pavement around dusk, we found a flat spot tucked against a rock formation. Good windbreak, solid ground. We set up the tent, rolled out sleeping bags, and ate some jerky and canned beans. No fire that night, just cold food and an incredible starscape. The sky was unbelievably clear, with planes and satellites drifting overhead. We turned in around 10 or 11. Total silence descended. One distant coyote call, then nothing. No wind, no animals. I woke suddenly in the night, noticing the tent zipper was partially open, about 4 or 5 inches down from the top. We definitely closed it fully before sleeping. My girlfriend slept peacefully beside me, her breathing steady. Nothing seemed disturbed inside the tent. I felt weirdly exposed. Carefully, I zipped the door shut again, then sat listening intently. Dead silence surrounded us. That unique quietness you only experience in truly remote places. I stayed alert for maybe 20 minutes before lying back down. When morning came, my girlfriend asked if I'd unzipped the tent. I initially said no. Something about that night felt strange. A perfect, unbroken circle lingering in my memory from some past encounter in another forest. Whatever had been out there didn't want that fire burning through its territory. I don't know exactly what happened, but something was definitely watching. We were camping that summer, and something weird happened. I was 16 and really into photography back then. Long exposure shots, star trails, time lapses. My parents' place is out in a remote area with almost no light pollution, so the night skies are incredible. When we woke up that morning, everything seemed off from the start. We stepped out of the tent to make breakfast, and right in front of our campsite was something that made us stop cold. Our firewood, about 8 or 10 sticks in a mesh bag we'd left by the back tire, had been arranged in a perfect flat ring on the ground. Every piece was positioned exactly the same distance apart, maybe 3 feet across, centered directly in front of our tent door. We hadn't touched the firewood. We hadn't planned a fire, and I was certain it hadn't been moved when I went to bed. I'd stepped over the bag, entering the tent. The ground was sandy gravel, but there were no boot prints, no tire tracks, nothing around this strange wood circle. We stood there in silence. It was bright daylight, but something felt wrong, like the entire landscape was holding its breath. I walked around our campsite, checking everything. The cooler was untouched. Our packs were zipped. I looked for any signs, footprints, drag marks, animal tracks, but found nothing. The firewood itself was bizarre, completely clean. No scratches, no soot, no insects. Just dry sticks laid end to end in a perfect circle, not even a broken twig. I asked my companion if she'd gotten up or heard anything. She hadn't. And she's a light sleeper. We both would have heard something approaching. After about 10 minutes of total confusion, we packed up. No breakfast, no hike. We didn't talk much while breaking down the tent. Everything went into the Forerunner quickly, and we were back on the road by 9 a.m. Later that afternoon, back in town, I checked the firewood bag. It was empty. Not a single stick remained. We never saw anyone else out there. No cars passed us going in or out. Nothing else ever came of it. Nothing followed us home. We never went back. I set up my Canon T6i on a tripod in an open field that night, aiming the kit lens straight up. The conditions seemed perfect. Clear skies, no moon, warm but not humid. I started the intervalometer to capture one frame every 10 seconds over 3 hours, hoping to catch some meteors or satellites. This wasn't an active observation. I mostly scrolled on my phone, glancing up occasionally. The night passed uneventfully. A few planes crossed the sky. Some shooting stars flickered, but nothing remarkable happened. Around midnight, I packed up and went inside. The next morning, I transferred the images to my laptop, quickly scrolling through over 1,000 frames. At first, everything looked normal. The stars rotated smoothly, creating nice trails across the images. But halfway through the sequence, something strange caught my eye. One frame was completely black, not overexposed or glitchy, but as if something had simply erased the stars. Zooming in, I realized this wasn't a cloud. The edges were too sharp, too defined. It wasn't a lens cap or any typical obstruction. The frames before and after were completely normal, which made this anomaly even more puzzling. I isolated 3 frames, the 2 normal ones and the black one, and calculated that whatever passed through must have moved incredibly quickly, crossing the frame in under 20 seconds. When I boosted the contrast and exposure, a bizarre shape emerged. It wasn't circular like a drone or balloon, nor was it a plane. The outline was uneven and jagged, almost like a massive, asymmetrical mountain hanging in the sky. Strangely, I couldn't recall hearing any sound when this happened. No hum, no rush of wind. Later that afternoon, I returned to the exact spot where the object would have passed. There was nothing to see, no trace left behind. If I hadn't checked the photos, I would never have known anything unusual occurred. The yard behind the shed was empty, nothing out of place and of Latin grass. Now Eard smells just a normal stretch of ground. I looked up, trying to comprehend how massive something must have been to block out that much sky. It had to be huge like a football field. Huge sleep became impossible that night. Kept getting up to check the back window, wondering if it would return or if it had always been there. And had just never noticed before. I didn't mention anything to my parents. I didn't want them thinking he was delving into conspiracy theories again 2 years earlier. Gone deep into space documentaries and spent hours watching ISS live feeds, my dad still teases me about that phase 2 days later. I stuck the camera again, same spot, same settings. Same sky, wanted to see if anything would happen. Let it run for 4 hours, just to be sure nothing unusual showed up. The stars moved, some planes crossed the frame, but no blackout and strange shapes appeared over the next few weeks. It tried again multiple times, always at the same time of night, always from the same angle, never catching anything unusual one night. I started to think maybe I agented the whole thing, or that it was just some camera glitch I couldn't understand. So I uploaded the frame to photography forums, asking if anyone recognized what he'd seen. Most people agreed it wasn't a sensor issue, something had definitely been between the lens and the stars, though Noon could explain exactly what. I kept the photo to myself, not wanting local gossip about UFO obsessions. People around here talk enough if you wear the wrong shoes to school months later, while reviewing the shots and notice something else. Right after the blackout, when the stars are, it turned 2 tinny points of light appeared in the bottom left corner. They hadn't been there before, close together. 2 close best stars, not moving like a plane, just hovering, then vanishing in the next frame. I hadn't seen them initially, because I was focused on the main blackout, but once I noticed them, I couldn't look away. They were small, but definitely present. Same color as stars, but in a different location, not following the expected path. That discovery unnerved me more than the initial massive shape, because it suggested there might have been more than one thing out there. After that, I stopped taking time lapses for a while. It just felt too strange. Here's a rewritten version. The flight had been routine until that moment. Salt Lake to Bakersfield, a route I knew well. Smooth air, clear skies, autopilot engaged. Just another quiet evening crossing the Utah-Nevada border. Something caught my eye off the left wing tip. Not another plane exactly. A dark shape with no lights, no movement. Just sitting there. I watched, waiting for it to shift or for air traffic control to say something. Nothing happened. My radar showed nothing. Zero contact. The object matched my every move. Speed, altitude, everything. 200 or 300 yards out, perfectly positioned. It wasn't threatening, just present. Like a hole in the sky, darker than the surrounding darkness. I tried everything. Adjusted heading, changed speed, tilted the plane. Whatever this thing was, it stayed exactly in place. 5 knots slower, it slowed. Back to original speed, it matched. No turbulence, no pressure changes, just smooth, unbroken air, and this presence. I hesitated to call it in, didn't want to sound crazy. Nothing aggressive was happening, but something felt deeply wrong. This thing wasn't behaving like any aircraft I'd ever seen, just hanging there, perfectly synchronized, like we were connected by an invisible line. I still have the photo. Never show it. Never talk about it. But it exists, a silent reminder of that strange evening high above the desert when something inexplicable rode alongside me. I was flying over central Nevada when something strange happened. My routine flight took an unexpected turn, and even now, I can't fully explain what I experienced. I was cruising along, everything normal, when a dark shape caught my eye. The moment I tried to turn toward it, it vanished, not accelerating away, not dropping altitude, just gone in an instant. I checked my radar and tried contacting air traffic control, keeping my inquiry vague. They confirmed no known aircraft in the area. The rest of the flight proceeded without incident, but my GPS track revealed an odd detail. A subtle 10-minute span where the flight path dipped slightly, as if the plane had drifted down about 50 feet before correcting itself. The autopilot was engaged the entire time, and I hadn't touched the controls. There was no change in pitch, no turbulence, nothing I would have noticed. Yet the altitude data showed this soft, slow descent and gentle climb back up, like something had subtly drawn the plane lower without my awareness. Barometric readings showed no anomaly, and that dark shape never reappeared. Weeks later, at home, my daughter Liv burst into the house from the porch. She was 13 then, old enough to sense something was wrong, but still young enough to get excited easily. Initially, I thought she might be overreacting about deer or a passing plane, but her urgency was different. When I stepped outside with her, an eerie silence struck me first. No frogs, no insects, no wind rustling the cornfield, just absolute quiet. Then I saw it, a pale, round light hovering about 30 feet above the south end of the field, roughly 100 yards from the house. It wasn't a drone, helicopter, or plane, just a hazy, moon-colored orb floating motionless. I still don't know what I saw that night. It wasn't like anything I'd encountered before. Too large for a drone with no lights, no heat signature, no transponder. Just something impossible, defying explanation, hanging there in the stillness of the evening. Field empty, silent, motionless. My wife stepped out, whipping her handson a dish towels topping in the doorway when she spotted it. Nobody spoke, hovering the real light about basketball-sized, no discernible shape, nowing snow fuselage and rotors, just suspended in midair. We watched from the porch, Minute sticking by the dog's unusually quietly and still by the laundry room door, which struck us a sod smooth as silk. The light drifted maybe 10 or 50 feet east, then halted again without sound or wobble. Something pulled me forward, and I walked into the yard without thinking, trying to get closer. My wife called my name softly enough to break my trance. When it turned back, she looked frightened. The light had vanished completely, no flash. Not trail, just gone. We kept quiet that night, agreeing with my wife that her daughter Liv shouldn't mention this at school, not out of disbelief, but to protect her from potential ridicule. We didn't report, it didn't photograph anything. Unsure how to explain what we'd witnessed, morning came, and before breakfast he walked out to investigate, expecting nothing significant, but discovered something remarkable underneath. To where the light had hovered, a perfect 30-foot circle of cornstalks, each twisted precisely a quarter turn clockwise, standing uprighty. Etritated base completely intact, no ground disturbance, not racks. Just this precise circular manipulation. Examining closer, it tried turning a stalk back, requiring significant strength. These were late-season dry corn stalks, note easily moved. Whatever caused this wasn't gentle, the circle's edge razor-sharp, normal field transitioning instantly to twisted vegetation, a stark, unexplained phenomenon. Stalks, the Normal again, I walked the perimeter twice. Nothing seemed out of place. No smell, no scorched earth, nothing weird that afternoon. A few weeks later, the corn dried out enough to harvest. I went over that patch carefully. Most of the twisted stalks had stayed upright, but their yield was lower, almost like the ears didn't develop fully. Some had tiny kernels, others were shriveled. Outside the circle, everything was fine. I drove into town and talked to a friend at the co-op. Casually, I asked about fungus, wind shear, or pests that could twist plants at the root. He looked at me like I'd grown a second head. If wind did it, he said, you'd see flattening or bending at the top. Fungus doesn't make clean circles. I didn't press him. We kept it quiet. Even Liv didn't mention it again. For the next couple nights, strange things happened. Our motion sensor light on the shed clicked on twice, though nothing was there. One night around 3 a.m., the dogs started whining simultaneously, but didn't bark. They just stared at the back door. When I got up, turned on the porch light, and stepped outside, there was nothing. No animals, no cars, no sound. Just the same dead quiet as that first night. That winter, I turned the soil and planted rye like always. By spring, the ground looked normal again. But every now and then, when the sky is real clear and I'm out late locking up the barn, I still find myself looking out at that spot. Not for long, just enough to check. We'd been camping out in the woods for 2 days, just me and my son. I wanted to do something different for his birthday, so we picked a spot a little off the beaten path. No cell service, minimal noise, just the forest itself. I figured it'd be good to get him away from screens, let him experience the quiet. It was supposed to be simple, some fishing, a little hiking, sleeping under the stars. The first night was normal enough. We set up the tent, cooked hot dogs over the fire, and settled in for bed around 10. The air was cool but not cold, with the usual forest sounds. Leaves rustling, crickets chirping, owls hooting far off. I remember thinking it was peaceful, the kind of quiet you don't get in a city. My son fell asleep pretty fast, and I stayed up a little longer, just listening to the night. When I finally nodded off, I didn't expect anything strange to happen. I woke my son softly, whispering his name. He rubbed his eyes, looking confused as I showed him our dead devices. Every battery-powered item we had was completely powerless. My watch, his phone, my phone, even the small flashlight from my bag. Nothing worked. The tent felt different, darker than before. When I opened the flap, an unnatural silence greeted me. No wind, no insects, no birds, just absolute stillness. The trees stood motionless, not a single leaf moving. The sky above was a blank black canvas, as if the stars had been erased. A tight knot formed in my chest. We sat up together, the silence pressing around us. I kept glancing outside, half expecting to see something, anything, but there was nothing. I checked the batteries in my gear bag, but everything looked normal. No damage, no loose connections. I tried calling out, just my son's name, hoping for a response. But my voice seemed to vanish, swallowed by the incredible quiet. No echo, no answer. We remained like that for hours, listening to absolute nothingness. When dawn finally broke, everything changed. Birds started calling, the wind returned, and the forest came back to life. My phone powered on with a full battery, and my watch began ticking normally again. We packed up quickly, hiking back to the car in near silence. The entire journey, I kept looking back at the trees, half expecting to see something watching us, but nothing ever did. That night at home, I couldn't shake the memory of those strange, silent hours. Night camping can be a peaceful experience, but sometimes the wilderness holds mysteries that defy explanation. I was out in the middle of nowhere, about 20 miles from the nearest town, with just my backpack and an old DSLR camera. My goal was simple: escape everything. No cell signal, no people, just forest and sky. I enjoy capturing night skies, so I set up my tripod in a small clearing and started recording time lapses. The darkness was intense, heavy with stars and no moon in sight. By the campfire, I noticed the unusual silence. Distant owl calls and occasional rustling broke the stillness, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. After a while, I packed up my camera, zipped into my tent, and fell asleep. The next morning, I began reviewing the footage, expecting typical star movements. But something strange caught my eye about 2 hours into the recording. A tall, human-shaped figure stood silently behind my camera, facing away, barely visible as a dark shape. What made this truly unsettling was its complete stillness. No movement, no sound. I meticulously checked frame by frame, and in the next instant, the figure vanished without a trace. Not fading, not moving, just gone. I reviewed the entire recording multiple times. No other anomalies appeared, no strange lights, shadows, or noises. Just that single, inexplicable frame with the mysterious figure. I've shared this story with a few people, but no one can explain what I saw. The experience left me with more questions than answers, stuck in a space where normal rules seemed suspended. I was out night fishing alone, miles from the inlet. I've done this countless times, sometimes with my cousin, but that night I was solo. The water was calm, with barely visible stars peeking through a thin cloud layer. Total silence surrounded me, broken only by the boat's gentle creaking and occasional water sounds. Around 10:30 p.m., I dropped anchor and prepared for some bottom fishing. A small lantern hung off the back rail, and my headlamp was strapped over my hat. No other boats were in sight, just dark water and a distant shoreline glow behind me. I cast my line and waited, not particularly concerned about catching anything. I was enjoying the stilling. Near midnight, a strange tapping sound caught my attention. This wasn't like the usual boat noises, not a wave bump or anchor line movement. Something felt different. Later, when I reviewed the footage from my camping trip, things got even weirder. There was this figure, so clear yet so out of place. At first glance, it looked like a person standing tall and motionless, but something was off. I realized I hadn't heard any footsteps or unusual sounds the previous night. If someone had been behind me, I would have noticed. I checked outside my tent. The ground was undisturbed, with no footprints or signs of anyone nearby. It made no sense. Who or what was that? I packed up early and hiked back to my car. The trail felt different, like I was being watched, but every time I looked around, there was nothing. Just trees and quiet forest. Back home, I reviewed the footage on a larger screen. The figure never made sense. It didn't move, didn't make noise, and seemed to vanish without a trace. I thought about deleting the clip, but couldn't. It was like a moment frozen in time. I've returned to that spot several times since, but nothing unusual has happened. No strange figures, no unexplained sounds, just normal camping. I still can't explain that single, silent frame or understand what I saw. Was someone really there that night, or was it something else entirely? The tapping was slow and steady, like a gentle knock on the boat's hull. 3 taps, a pause, then 3 more. Not loud, but distinct and clear. I stood up, swinging my light around, wondering if some driftwood had bumped against me. Nothing. Just black water stretching in every direction. Leaning over the side, I shined my headlamp down. It only illuminated a few feet, revealing no debris, no fish breaking the surface, no birds. Maybe the current was playing tricks, brushing something underneath that I couldn't see. Then it happened again. 3 taps, a pause, 3 more. I walked to the other side of the boat, but the sound didn't follow. It remained near the rear, close to the hanging lantern. Kneeling down, I leaned over and listened. The tapping stopped for a few minutes. Just as I was about to stand, it returned. This time, right below where I crouched. 3 slow taps, then silence. Pulling the lantern up, I thought maybe it was attracting fish. Suddenly, the air felt different. Not colder, exactly, but denser, heavier. My breathing seemed loud in my ears, and everything around me grew unnaturally quiet. No bugs, no birds from the shore. Even the water seemed to stop moving. Standing there with the lantern, I stared into the water for what felt like an eternity. Nothing moved. Then the boat shifted slightly, as if something brushed against it from underneath. I'd experienced sharks and dolphins bumping the boat before, but this was different. Not a hit or a jolt, but a slow, almost deliberate push. Like someone placing their hand on the hull and dragging it. I turned off the lantern to see better in the dark, thinking the reflection might be distorting my vision. Instantly, it was as if a blanket had been thrown over the world. No stars, no horizon, not even the water's outline was visible. Then again, 3 taps, same rhythm. Turning the lantern back on, I scanned the water slowly in all directions. Nothing. I lowered the light on a rope, hoping for a better view below. That's when I noticed something strange. The water's surface wasn't reflecting properly. It looked dull, almost like glass, with something behind it slightly warping the light. Hesitantly, I dipped my hand in. The water felt normal at first, just regular seawater. But something was off when I pulled my hand out. A light flickered below the boat, not from the lantern, but underneath, a fast ripple in the glow, like something large had glided past beneath the surface. I hauled up the lantern and reeled in my line quickly, not caring about the bait or rig. I just wanted it out of the water. Starting the engine proved troublesome. It coughed once, died, and wouldn't restart. I checked everything: fuel line, spark plug, kill switch, and nothing seemed wrong. I pulled out my backup battery-powered radio for emergencies, but only static greeted me. Switching channels brought more white noise. Even my headlamp was acting strange, dimming despite fresh batteries. Sitting in the captain's chair, I waited. For what? I wasn't sure. Maybe something to break the surface or the fog to roll in. Then the tapping started again, slower this time. 1 tap, pause. 2 taps, pause. 1 more. It felt like an attempt to communicate, though I couldn't understand. I remained frozen, listening. Eventually, the air normalized. The pressure in my head eased, and I could hear crickets from the shore again. On my first try, the engine started. The radio clicked on mid-broadcast, as if nothing had happened. I didn't hesitate, pulling the anchor and heading toward the inlet as fast as possible. Back at the dock, I tied off and checked the hull with my flashlight. No scratches, no dents, nothing unusual. But the lantern I'd pulled up earlier was dead. Batteries were fine, bulb intact. It just wouldn't turn on. I left it on the workbench in my garage. Days later, I checked the lantern again. It worked perfectly. Since that night, I haven't gone out alone after dark. I've been back on the water plenty of times, even near the same spot. But something changed that night. The night was cold and quiet, typical for a winter graveyard shift at a small independent radio station outside Flagstaff. I'd been running the midnight to 4 a.m. slot for a while now, mostly playing pre-programmed tracks with minimal live interaction. That Thursday, everything started normally. I arrived around 11:30, checked the playlist, and remembered scraping frost off my windshield in the parking lot. We usually ran classic rock and old-school alternative during late shifts, but I'd occasionally sneak in ambient tracks to keep myself awake. Just after 2 a.m., something unusual happened. I was reaching for my coffee after fading out of a long instrumental track when the phone line blinked. It was the first call of the night. I expected a trucker or someone looking to make a request, so I answered with the standard, "You're on the air. What can I play for you?" But instead of a voice, I heard a strange, high-pitched digital tone. Not static, not feedback, but a clean note reminiscent of old dial-up modem sounds. When I said, "Hello again," nothing changed. Then the tone shifted dramatically. It dropped low and mechanical, with layers of chirps and clicks that sounded like automated signals or compressed data. The sound wasn't random. It pulsed with an almost rhythmic quality that I couldn't quite understand. I took the call off air and continued listening. This didn't feel like a prank. It was too deliberate, too precise. After about 30 seconds, the signal abruptly stopped. No click, no hang-up, just complete silence. When I looked back at the console, everything was frozen. No signal was going to the tower, and despite not touching anything except the phone, nothing worked. The mic channel was active, but the board wasn't feeding anything to the transmitter. Even my monitor feed had gone silent. I tried calling our tech guy, the first time I'd ever needed to wake him during a shift. He didn't answer, so I left a message and started the process of rebooting the system, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. The station's digital logger saved entire broadcasts in 5-hour blocks, and I pulled the file for that night to investigate what happened. When I reviewed the recording, everything initially seemed normal. My voice came through, clearly introducing the track and stating the station ID. But then something strange occurred. At the moment I answered the phone, the audio completely disappeared. For 6 full minutes, there was total silence, no tones, no hum, not even my own voice. The waveform was completely flat. When I skipped ahead, the audio suddenly returned mid-track, as if nothing unusual had happened. What truly unsettled me wasn't just the live anomaly, which could potentially be explained by a technical glitch. It was the fact that this entire segment had vanished from the logs, like my side of the interaction had been completely erased. I checked our basic caller ID system, which time-stamped every incoming call. The screen showed a call at 2:14 a.m. with a withheld number, lasting 47 seconds. When I attempted to call back, I received a fast, busy signal, the kind you hear when a line has been disconnected. I didn't discuss the incident with anyone. I submitted a generic note about a system hang to the tech crew, carefully omitting any details about the tones or signal drop. The manager didn't seem to notice, and the rest of the week proceeded normally. Then the following Thursday at 2:18 a.m., the phone rang again, same withheld number. I hesitated before answering, not putting the call on air. The sound began similarly, a high, steady tone that dropped into a layered mechanical hum, identical to the first call. This time, it lasted only about 20 seconds before a distinct click interrupted the noise. Then, a voice spoke, and I can't explain it any other way. It didn't sound human, but it wasn't robotic either. It was just wrong. Speaking through a filter, the words distorted, slurred into tones clipped mid-syllable without any inflections, something like in bound echoed with a strange delay between syllable silence. Then everything the broadcast stayed live, but my mic fell silent for a minute noon noticed or called about. Kept the music playing and stopped taking calls, so I remained in the booth until sun risen, never receiving another similar call. I monitored the logs, recorded backups of every shift. Nothing emerged, no dropped signals, no more silence, just that single week with 2 calls. Sometimes he wondered if it was some shortwave enthusiast bouncing signals or satellite interference, but didn't believe that explanation, not with how unnervingly quiet the line was. Nothing comparable existed in the archive. I copied the original files to a USB drive, but months later, when it tried replaying them, the audio had degraded to a solid electrical buzzy. You couldn't hear anything. Yet I remembered what I heard, the sensation of something pushing into the signal, not just riding alongside it, but coming through the silence itself. For years I'd use the same spot behind my house for stargazing, nothing fancy, just a fold-out lawn chair, a cheap telescope on a tripod, and an old coffee-filled thermos. The sky remained clear most nights with low enough light pollution to see a good portion of the Milky Way. He wasn't professional, just enjoyed cataloging my observations, sketching constellations, logging satellite, shopping to catch meteor showers. Early September marked the start when nights began cooling and I'd returned to wearing hoodies around 10:30. I was pointing my telescope toward Cassiopeia, tracking some double stars when something unusual caught my attention near the bottom arm of the Waystar. Behaved strangely, not flickering from atmospheric distortion, but pulsing with a slow rhythmic beat, subtle enough to miss unless you were deliberately watching. I first noticed it while sketching, a faint, steady flicker between the stars. Something seemed off, so I marked a question mark in the margin. The next night, I checked again. Same brightness, same flicker. But this time, it had shifted slightly, no longer aligned with the surrounding stars. I pulled out my previous sketch to compare. Definitely moved, just a hair, but enough to catch my eye if you were paying attention. For 20 solid minutes, I watched. No movement, just that weird, offbeat flicker, unlike anything else in the sky. By the third night, I was looking for it immediately. It had drifted even farther, now sitting just outside one of Cassiopeia's main arms. I checked everything: flight paths, satellite maps, amateur forums. Nothing matched. No known satellite stays in one area that long, and this definitely wasn't a standard star. Around the 5th or 6th night, the oddity really sank in. It wasn't just moving. The movement felt deliberate. Each night, it drifted in the same direction by about the same distance. An uneasy feeling crept in, like it was tracking something, with a purpose. I told my friend Tom, an astronomy enthusiast. He came out on the 7th night with his binoculars and saw it too. "Not a plane," he said, "and that flicker's too clean." We kept watching together for several nights. Same slow drift, same pulsing flicker. One night, it didn't move at all. Just sat there, waiting. That was the same night my telescope stopped focusing. Everything else in the sky remained crisp, but when I turned toward that spot, the image went soft. Not blurry, exactly, but like the lens didn't want to cooperate. I adjusted it every way possible. Still no clarity. Tom's binoculars were fine, but even he said it looked off, like it wasn't there exactly, but just behind something. I tried taking a photo through my scope. Nothing showed up, just black sky. The star we'd been tracking through the telescope vanished completely from Cassiopeia, and something strange began happening. Around 3 a.m., sometimes later, I started seeing these odd light phenomena. A faint, silent streak would arc across the sky, different from a meteor. It moved too slowly, didn't burn out, and looked more like a shadow passing in front of the stars, similar to a bird's silhouette against a streetlight, but higher and completely silent. I witnessed this 3 times over 2 weeks, always between 2 and 4 a.m., always in the same region of the sky. Then my backyard motion light started acting weird. It would flick on randomly during those same hours. Initially, I assumed it was animals, raccoons or deer, but when I checked, nothing was there. No movement, no sound. One night, I sat outside with the light unplugged, watching. Around 3:15, the flicker started again, but this time closer. About 100 feet off the ground, a soft, faint pulse hovered silently for maybe 10 seconds before fading away. I kept this experience to myself and stopped going out at night for a while. Weeks later, when I finally looked again, the star was simply gone. Not moved, not dimmed, just absent. The patch of sky felt different, almost like my eyes wanted to slide past it, as if it were too empty. I kept checking, even buying a better telescope, but nothing returned. Yet the motion light continues to flick on some nights, always around 3 a.m. I apologize, but there seems to be no text provided for me to rewrite. Could you please share the full text you would like me to restructure?